Hey, everybody, and welcome to And Action Filmmaking Podcast. It is good to be back. We had a little layover, had a little time off, but we're back in the saddle again, and we have a very special topic. We're going to be honoring and paying tribute to the legendary Tom Sizemore, who we lost not too long ago. Rest in peace, Tom. We're very excited to get into that and really celebrate the life of Tom Sizemore and tell some great stories, share some memories. Mike and I have both had the chance to work with Tom on multiple occasions. So we're just going to kind of tribute Tom and talk a little bit about some of the good times that we've had with him. But before we get into that, Mike, how are you? What's going on? How you been in this little layover that we've had?
I've been pretty good, Tommy. It's good to see you again, buddy. And I've been all right. I've been entering the short film Disregard into festivals. It's won 7 awards so far, and hopefully more to come. And uh, the festivals that it's been in so far have been international, like from India, places like that. So uh, coming up, hopefully there'll be some in Texas or Florida or New England, and we'll see what happens.
Now, what's this film? That's it. Which film is this?
It's titled Disregard. There's a 1 minute teaser me and my editor Tim just made, and that's on One Man in a Camera Films. I've recently split up my YouTube channel, Tommy. I had to subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel for 3 or 4 years, but I decided that the wrestling content, the my own films, the Messier mantra, my angry rants, my movie reviews, they were just too much for one channel. So I was kind of working against myself. So I decided to split up the channels. So the One Man in the Camera Films from now on will have my own personal work, like my films that I'm making, like Disregard and the teaser. And one Mike Messier YouTube channel will have my film reviews and my angry rants about life. And then the One Pro Wrestling Fan will have the pro wrestling stuff.
So you're kind of living a dual personality on the internet of sorts. You've got your two different personas. It was just too much for one channel. I understand that. Listen, a lot of times we call that mixing mojos in the
Yeah.
world of entertainment. A lot of times, you'll see sometimes as movies mix mojos. They're trying to be a funny movie, but it's dark, but it's trying to be you gotta sometimes stick to a theme. So that sounds like what you're doing, Mike, and I applaud you for that because let me tell you, I've been going hard on my YouTube page recently and trying to get a lot traction going, and I've been really pumping it. And once you put time into a channel and you grow it a little bit, it's tough to start over. So credit to you for picking up and starting anew.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. And and things like working with you on this on Tom DiNucci filmmaker channel. I think what you've done well from the start, uh, maybe with some advice from me, is you've kept it as a filmmaker. Like you've kept this channel, the Tom DiNucci Film Channel, for your film interests, your film work. You haven't put, for instance, a weightlifting guide or a pro wrestling rants or anything. You've kept it to film, and I think that's really
Well,
smart.
not to cut you off, buddy, but it's funny. When I first started, I was doing more what you had been doing, where I did have a couple like, a fitness video, an action figure video, a cat video. And recently, like you said, I've been trying to just keep it a little more focused on the film stuff. But I do think, for any social media folks out there, people who are trying to get into the world of building a YouTube channel, I think it's okay to have a theme, but I think it's also okay to shift away from that once in a while to show people that you're not just some fucking robot who only cares about one thing. Like I will still occasionally post a cat video, or I went to a wrestling show in Providence not too long ago. I'll post a wrestling video, but yeah, I have been trying to just stick to what works. And yes, Mike, I do appreciate that advice. Mike's been a big help along the way, helping me get my subscribers up there, and I just recently got over 1,000 subscriptions. So thank you
Congratulations.
very much. Appreciate that. We're really, I got to say, there were some times early on when I was getting literally like a subscriber every 3 days, and I remember saying to myself, like, how the fuck am I ever going to get 1,000 of these? It's going to take me a decade. But anyone out there who's struggling to get some heat under their channel, just know that consistency is everything. You got to kind of put it out there. If you get hesitant and you start saying, "Ooh, I don't know if this video is good. I don't know if people are going to like this." That's the wrong attitude to have. I'm not saying you want to over volumize and just throw any shit up there, but you got to have stuff out there. You got to create content. If you build it, they will come. So thank you for everybody who's subscribed in the last few months. And here's to the next 1,000. Stephen E is with us. He
Hey,
says,
Stephen
"Welcome
E.
back, bros.
Stephen
Thank
E.
you for having me back."
I didn't even get a chance to send a reminder to Stephen E. today, and he still got in here. So thanks, Stephen E. Tell Kim Kaling to come in because I forgot to text her too. Um, Real quick, Tommy, as some of the folks know, I've had some technical issues over the last few weeks, but I will be in a new location in about 2 weeks. So I think that'll be cleared up because the Wi-Fi on my end will be a lot stronger. So I appreciate people sticking through the troubling
Yeah,
times recently,
you
but it
heard
should
Mike.
improve.
It's not my fault. It's all Mike's fault. Everything that's happening with it's all Mike.
Yeah.
But he will be moving soon, and we do appreciate that. Moving's always a big kick in the balls, Mike. How's that been going for you?
You know, Tommy, I look at it as an adventure, but I mean, for me, the biggest thing, buddy, is I'm literally moving myself. Like, I'm not hiring a company. I don't have a friend with a truck down here. It's basically me in my regular car moving my stuff
Sure.
from one place to a place about 25 minutes away. So I've actually been eBaying a lot of stuff to get rid of some things I don't want. I've been giving away things to the Goodwill, all types of
See
stuff.
what Stephen E just said?
What's
Tommy,
that?
got room on the porch if you need Mike to if you need to crash there, Mike. I'll tell you what, Stephen, not only does Mike have room on the porch, Mike has his own goddamn bedroom at the Danucci compound here.
Yep.
To the point where when Mike will occasionally come to stay, I'll say like it's some bed and breakfast. I'll be like, "I will prepare your room, sir. I shall clean the sheets." The cats go in Mike's room. But basically, when Mike's not staying at my house, that's my cat's room, and they lay on his bed and kind of wait for him to come home. Um, but hopefully, we'll get a Mike visit sometime soon. You know, Mike usually makes about a biannual visit to Rhode Island, so he's about due in another couple months. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that'll happen, and hopefully this summer, whether it's early, mid, or late summer. And I had a great time up there last July. I remember it well. We watched the Ric Flair final match. We did some film work together on the
Yes,
once set. But
that was
I
a
appreciate.
blast, man. But let's try to recapture that magic.
Yeah,
But enough about you, Mike. Let's talk about
sure.
me. You know what I've been doing is a lot of people know that I've been working on a movie for the last few weeks. As you know, you got to always bang on that pre-production. So it was a couple weeks before I was going pretty heavy prepping it, and then we shot the whole film in 11 days. It's currently titled Seclusion. It starred Nikki Whalen. It starred Dominique Swain. Really talented cast. Fred Sullivan's in the movie. Michael Zuccola's in the movie. And of course, Michael Copo's in the movie, who was the Blue Power Ranger. So this was a really cool film. Uh, I learned a lot about making films. And even though it's kind of funny, this is funny to say because I think this is my 10th or 11th feature that I've directed. But I learned so much on this movie, maybe more than I've learned on a movie since I think the biggest growth for me on a film was the movie Vault really taught me a lot about how to make films. Mainly because, and someday we're going to do a Vault episode. I've been kind of saving that. But I learned a lot on that movie because I was probably the least experienced person on set. Everybody that I had worked with, that was a union film, and the entire crew was just so talented. They had been making movies for 10, 20 years. Um, so I learned a lot on that movie, but on this one, it was a different kind of level of learning because I've never shot a movie in 11 days. So you have to adapt your style when you're only got 11 days to shoot. So this movie, I learned a lot about not being precious with my performances. I learned a lot about less takes, more coverage. I can't stress that enough. And I learned that, uh, you need a methodical plan going in. I was very much almost obsessed with this film to the point where, and I never really did this before. A lot of times on my other movies, there's always something you gotta figure out at the end of the day, some kind of prep for tomorrow. You usually, like, you'll wrap, and then you'll meet with your AD and maybe a producer or 2 for, like, 10 minutes at wrap and be like, "Alright, what are we doing about this tomorrow? Alright, we'll do this." He'll bring the car at 9 a.m. "Okay, great. Where are we gonna be? Where do I have to be? Alright, awesome, great. I'll see you guys in the morning." Then you get the fuck out of there and you rest because you're exhausted. This movie was different, and usually I check out, like, at night. I'll check out mentally. I'll do something to occupy my brain to not think about it. On this movie, I would go home, and I would pull up the next day and just get into it, like, hard. Like, really methodically think about what the fuck I'm doing first thing in the morning. And I'm not talking about, like, breeze over it. Like, I'm talking, like, spend hours after wrap on this shit. And I had never been more kind of, like, systematic with my approach on the day. The next day I would show up and be like, boom, camera on the jib, 2 shot coming down the stairs, and then we're gonna break right into this coverage, and then we're gonna put the camera on a slider. Like I knew, kind of like the old chess player there, planning 6, 7 moves in advance. I knew what the fuck was going on. So I learned a lot on this movie. It was a big kind of a eye opener to like, wow, you can really get a lot of shit done in 11 days if you know exactly what the fuck you're doing and you're never wasting time on set thinking about it. So that's what I took home from this. Let's check in with everybody here. Um, Hell, get Tommy to help you move with that stuff. Oh, I don't know about that, Steven. I got a bad back from an old football injury. I'm not allowed to lift
That's the
anything over
the
10
excuse in the
pounds.
book. Hey, Tommy, real
Yeah,
quick,
it's an old.
I'm having a little bit of that audio trouble, so that's why I'm muting myself when I'm not speaking. Uh, but I wanted to say that this was an Amy Wade original script. Is that correct? Our friend from Rhode Island. Is that true?
Yes, it is. I want to spend a little time just chatting about Amy Wade and how terrific she is. So Amy played one of the leads in the film and also wrote the script. So she kind of like did a little bit of everything on this movie. And also like we're gonna do a whole episode on seclusion and tell the whole fun story about how the movie kind of came about and Amy's involvement. But she's also, as they say, she does all her own stunts. Um, so pretty cool to see some of the things that she does in terms of physicality in this movie, and putting her body on the line for the greater good of the film. Ariana's checking in with us. What's up, Ariana? Ariana is currently doing a run of a play at the Arctic Playhouse, so you can check her out over there at the Arctic Playhouse in Warwick, not to be confused with Antarctica. That would be a much more difficult show to get to. Steven says, there is a reason he is down there and you are up here. Phil, okay. Yeah, well, you know what, Steven? What do they say? Good fences build good neighbors. Mike and I have a 2,000-mile fence between us, or however long the coast is. What's the East Coast? It's not 2,000 miles, but what is it, 1,000? It's got to be 1,000.
It takes me about 3 days to drive up there, Stephen E. But I actually enjoy the ride up. It makes me appreciate the friendships more when I have to travel to get to them.
Oh, that's sweet, Mike. I want to put that on a coffee mug with a couple of seagulls and a sunset. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you picture that?
I
Like
can
you and
picture
me
it,
would be
Tom.
the two, we would be the two seagulls, and the sun would represent all the great distance that we travel to be together. Um, okay, high intensity workout for film. That's basically what we did. You're right. It's Ariana's talking about high intensity training, which is when you blast out some heavy sets quick and just, really shock the muscle. We really shocked the shit out of the old crew muscle and banged out an entire movie in 11 days and just kept it rolling. So I apologize to anyone who worked on this movie if I was a maniac. I was just like, all right, what's next? What are we doing? What are we doing? Let's move. Let's move. Because the clock's ticking all the time. All right. enough about our bullshit. We're not here to talk about us today. We're here to talk about one of the best actors of our generation, one of the most talented people that I've ever had a chance. I'm talking with my own two eyes in the fucking room, see perform. And that is the late, great Tom Sizemore. Um, and Stephen E says it best here. Rest easy to Tom Sizemore. He had so much great scene work. He really did. And we're going to get into that now. We're going to shift gears, talk all about the man that brought us here today. Um, so, Tom Sizemore is a guy that, you know, everybody knows his face. You know, if you've watched a movie in the last 20 years, you've seen Tom Sizemore. He's always known for playing these kind of edgy characters, these um, characters that are pursuing light but are shaded with a little bit of darkness themselves. You know, he kind of always embodied that spirit of like he's the good guy, but there's a little something edgy about him. You know, he's not your typical, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed baby face type good guy. He's that good guy who's got some shit with him. You know, he's got a little bit of extra baggage that he's carrying. He's always played those characters, whether it's the detective who's kind of on the hunt for somebody, or what he's most famous for, I would say, is playing, these great brave soldier type roles. You know, everybody knows him from, I'd say the biggest movie that, you could drop that most people would know about is Tom Sizemore's performance in Saving Private Ryan and Black Hawk Down. Those were two movies that kind of made him a bit of a really a legend in the eyes of a lot of veterans. It's pretty amazing. You know, I've gotten to work with Tom on a few movies, and you'd be surprised. There were a lot of moments uh, when you'd see a veteran come up to him, and you'd see the military baseball hat with their troop or whatever, they're with their unit, or you'd see like a military jacket or some kind of clothing that they'd be wearing that like, okay, this guy's the real deal. And they'd come right up to Tom, and they would these are these like really tough looking guys, and they would just kind of be like, "Hey, just want you to know, uh, you really played a soldier right. Like you did right by us with your portrayal." Because, listen, this happens to doctors when they watch movies with doctors. This happens to cops when they watch movies with cops. Sure, it happens to soldiers when they watch movies, about the military. There's nothing worse than when that occupation, that profession, that lifestyle, and you see it butchered on screen, and you're like, "Hey, we would never do that. That's bullshit." Like that would never happen. A lot of I've got friends that are cops, and a lot of times they're like, "Ah, cops would never do that. We would never do that. That would be so against protocol." And it's like, yeah, it's a movie. Um, but Tom was kind of getting a lot of credit from these real deal veterans that would come up to him, like in public, and just say, like, literally, like, "Thank you for portraying us that way." That was a really honest portrayal of what a soldier is. Um, so, that kind of says a lot right there. Mike, what are some Tom Sizemore movies that strike a chord with you?
Well, it's interesting. Tom's first big role, it wasn't that big of a role, but he was in Born on the 4th of July, which was a Tom Cruise movie. And Tommy, funny story, I actually wrote like an English paper about that film back in high school. And the teacher of the
Wow.
class actually photocopied my essay and handed it out to the other students and told them that that's how you're supposed to write a paper about a film.
No
So,
shit. Look at
yeah,
you.
that's true
Look
story,
at you
buddy. True
writing
story.
essays, dropping essay knowledge on the whole fucking class like a
Yeah.
boss.
Um, but Tom Sizemore's in the Born on the 4th of July film, and for my money, Tommy, that's a movie that could have easily been an Oscar award-winning film. I don't think it did, but it really is of that magnitude. And he played one of the post-Vietnam army, military people
Right.
who's in a wheelchair. He's in a wheelchair next to Tom Cruise, who's playing Roger
And
Kovic.
isn't he like a little bit of isn't he like a wild man, right? Kind of a wild man character
Yeah,
in the
I
movie.
believe so. Yes. Yep. And
Yeah, no, so
then we're
that's a
talking.
great point, Mike. That's Oliver Stone directing you right there. That's no fucking joke.
And then
You
we're
know,
moving.
right out of the gate.
He kind of had a 1-2 punch in the 1994 era with two Quentin Tarantino scripts, Of course, one of them was True Romance, which Tarantino did not direct, but another one was Natural Born Killers. I think Tarantino did he work on that script? That's an Oliver Stone movie. But
It's another Oliver Stone movie, but it is a Quentin Tarantino script, I believe. I don't know that he has the sole writing credit, but I believe he is a writer on the script. We could use the powers of the internet to figure that out. But yeah,
but
he talk about a pedigree. You know, when you talk about like that kind of a pedigree of directors and writers that were kind of in the same space as Tom as a young actor coming up, probably in his late 20s, early 30s at the time. So Tom was certainly on a fast track to be a bona fide movie star. I love him in movies like he's in one scene in the movie Point Break, which is just so fucking memorable, where he plays this DEA agent who's been undercover for like months. And it's a fucking great scene. I'm not going to try and do it. I won't do it any justice, but you could probably YouTube just that one scene and see it. And you could watch it with no frame of reference and just, you don't have to watch the whole movie. You can just watch the scene and be like, oh my God, that guy's just a craftsman. Like he's just working this fucking scene. It's a scene where he's pissed off because um, these kind of newbie cops blow a case. They bust in and blow a case that he's been working undercover for months. And it's just so fucking well done. So Tom, just to rattle off a few others, he was in the movie Heat, which of course was one of the mega sort of action drama type movies of the mid 90s, which to this day, if you watch some of the shoot 'em up scenes in Heat, I mean, that shit still plays. So if you haven't seen Heat, check that movie out. Here's a fun one, Mike. Do you remember The Relic, which was a little bit of like a sci-fi kind of a movie?
I never saw it, but I've been watching some, tributes on YouTube and other places for Tom, and The Relic comes up as a movie that people are kind of discovering now or rediscovering and saying, "Hey, that was a pretty good movie that Tom was in."
It really was. Again, he was Tom Sizemore was a movie star in the 1990s when it fucking meant something to be a movie star. Long before the internet, long before Instagram. I mean, yeah, the internet was a thing, but it didn't fucking matter. It wasn't, how people are identified like today. There were no YouTube channels. There was no TikTok. Back then, if you were a famous person, you just had to be wildly fucking talented. You just had to be really, really fucking good at what you do. And that's what Tom was. He was just really fucking good at what he did. And that's why these movies that we're rattling off, again, back in the day when it didn't really matter how many, this TikTok star has 20 million followers, so we're going to hand them a movie. It's like, no, fuck that. Tom had talent. He didn't need TikTok followers, and that's why he's in movies like, Natural Born Killers, Wyatt Earp, True Romance, Point Break. It's just incredible. And recently, this is kind of a fun one too. Like, I was a big fan of Entourage coming up. I was like the perfect age when that show came out, and at the time, I was a wannabe actor trying to make my way in the business. And people actually used to tell me that I looked like Vinny Chase when I had the fucking long curly hair back then. And I probably like got excited about that at the time. So I used to watch Entourage religiously. And I remember Tom Sizemore being on the show. And if you remember that show, Mike, it was almost like a thing to play yourself on the show. Like if you played yourself, that was almost like even better than playing a character. Like I remember Eric Roberts plays Eric Roberts. I remember Tom Sizemore plays Tom Sizemore in the show. Um, Shout out to Vanessa Angel who plays Vanessa Angel. Vanessa Angel's a great friend, and she's worked on a few of my films. And again, it just shows you like that meant something. If you were in Entourage playing yourself, that's a pretty big deal in terms of like star status. So that
Hey,
was
Tom,
cool. And then more recently,
just for the people that don't remember or never saw it, Entourage was a show I think in the early 2000s where I think it was actually Mark Wahlberg was the executive producer who had the. It was kind of loosely based on Mark Wahlberg's life with his brothers and I think Kevin Dillon played the goofy brother of the main character there, who was a star leading man actor, and he had his entourage of kind of friends. Some of them were goofy, some of them
It
were
was a great
sophisticated.
show. Jeremy Piven was on the show as well. If you haven't seen Entourage, get your fucking head out of the dirt and watch that shit. It's hard to imagine people wouldn't even know what Entourage is, but I guess if you're teenager watching the show or something, you probably weren't even born when that show came out. Like Mike said, I think the first episode aired in '03, '04. Yeah, so it meant something to play yourself on Entourage. And then recently, as in the last, well, I guess not that recently, but Twin Peaks was a very, very big show in the '90s. It was this kind of crime drama show long before crime drama shows were a thing. They kind of like, they really were like, in terms of like these murder shows are so everyone's so fucking hot for murder these days, right? People love these murder investigation shows. I'm guilty as charged. When I'm looking for some comfort TV, if it's not Baywatch, it's going to be Dateline or Forensic Files because we love this the kind of for me, I like the investigation aspect of it. I like how they catch these people, and I think that everyone's kind of fascinated with that. So there was a show called Twin Peaks back in the '90s. It was fucking incredibly popular, and then in 2017 it came back, and Tom Sizemore did six episodes of it, and it was a pretty big deal for Twin Peaks to come back when it came back. So that was a bit of a resurgence for Tom. And around that era, that's why I mentioned it. That's right around the time that I was doing the majority of my work with Tom, and that's when Mike worked with Tom as well. Maybe a year or two before that Twin Peaks. Um, so let's get right into it. I had a chance to work with Tom on a few movies. There was so much that happened during these stretches of time that I had to really write some stuff down, and I wanted to kind of gather my thoughts and make sure we don't miss anything. But at the time, and I want to say this without being ugly or negative, but at the time, Tom's career had stumbled a little bit, I guess you could say. He wasn't in these massive studio movies like the movies that we were talking about earlier, and he was on the comeback trail. Which is why there is a light at the end of this story. The comeback trail for Tom was landing a massive show like Twin Peaks back in 2017. But before that, he was just kind of stringing together some momentum and working on a lot of these smaller films. At the time, I was coming up, and a smaller film seemed like the biggest thing in the world to me. So I was just happy to be there. But we got to work together on the set of a movie called The Assault, which check the archives for And Action. You can go back and dig that one up, and there's a lot of great Tom stories among other assault stories in that one. Um, but this movie that we did was shot right in Cromwell, Connecticut, and Tom was the star of the movie, and he was our ace, if you will. Um, and it was really cool to see Tom because at the time, yeah, I'd worked on a few movies, but I had very limited interaction with a lot of stars. And the one thing that I remember right off the bat was just Tom's willingness to rub shoulders with the people of Cromwell, Connecticut, which is a very small town, right? I believe in kind of like central Connecticut ish. I could be completely wrong about that. I'm not a fucking map maker. But it's in Connecticut. I know that much. And he was just so nice to people. I mean, a small town like Cromwell doesn't get a ton of movie stars at the diner every now and then, just kind of ordering eggs. So to be able to hang out with Tom and see his interaction and see how he handled people and how he always had time for people, he always took the photos, he always, I'm talking like dozens of people like gathering around him, and he never turned anyone away. He was always very gracious, would look people in the eye, would give them a minute. It's one thing to sign an autograph, take a picture, and all right, but he would actually talk to these people for a couple, 2, 3 minutes and see what's going on. Oh, you like coming here? Oh, that's great. Um, so that was kind of the first thing for me, like I think, and there's probably a more intelligent way to say this, and I'm sure there's quotes about this, but you can really tell, the measure of a person by how they treat regular folks, how they treat just somebody who they can't get anything out of. It's not like they're being nice to somebody because like, oh, this guy's going to get me a promotion, or oh, this guy is going to hire me someday. They're good to, and I fucking hate this phrase. but you hear it all the time, like the little people. You know what I mean? Like they'll talk to anybody and they don't care. Like about status.
It's Tommy. It's like when you go on a date with somebody, you see how they treat the waiter or waitress. If they're rude to the waiter or waitress, you know that if this relationship continues, they're going to be rude to you eventually.
Wow, Mike, dropping some dating knowledge. I never really thought about that, but that's a good litmus test for if your date is a jerk or not. Because I fucking hate when people are rude to the wait staff. It is really like that's a character flaw and a half. Now, don't get me wrong, if the waiter or waitress is some, little prick and they did something to deserve it, well, those things happen. But casual rudeness to wait staffs and action will not stand for that shit. Okay, but moving on to talking about Tom. Um, So yeah, that was the big thing, He was just like really gracious to people, and I kind of like that about him. But there were a lot of cool things about Tom, like Tom loves sports and I love sports, so that's kind of how we bonded, like right off the bat. Like, there are two types of people when it comes to sports ball, if you will. There's the casual fan who's like, I like the Red Sox. Okay, sure. But then there's the person who can name like every fucking player on the team. I can tell you the roster. I can tell you, who's in the bullpen waiting to warm up. And that's the kind of fan that I am, and that's the kind of fan that Tom is. So when you're a sports person and you talk to another sports person, there are kind of these like it's almost like a boxing match where there's a couple of jabs that get thrown out early on just to see what kind of person we're dealing with. Do they really know what the fuck they're talking about? And you can usually tell when you're talking sports with someone within about 30 fucking seconds if this person's full of shit and they really know what's going on. Or like if you mention, for example, like if we're talking football and I'm like, oh yeah, that was crazy last week when this happened in this game. If they're like, oh, I didn't catch the game, then you're like, you don't like the Patriots. You didn't even watch the fucking game last week. Like, are you kidding me? We're missing games. We're not going to really talk about this anymore. So Tom was the kind of guy who, he knew what the fuck he was talking about. And when you find a fellow person like that, you really can hit it off, especially when you're in this, I don't want to say unfriendly environment, but you're in a new environment. It gave something for Tom and I to bullshit about a lot. So we started talking sports everywhere, and we became friends like within a couple days. We really hit it off on that movie. Real quick, let's check in with the crew here. Being rude to an employee, Ariana says, being rude to an employee is an immediate no for any friendship or relationship. Yeah, it's just like, you know, there's a lot more to life than being a dick to the person who works at Denny's.
Hey Tom,
Everyone
I'll be
remember to
right
give
back.
the thumbs up.
Tommy, I'll be right back. I gotta take care of something real quick.
Copy that. Charlie says, hi, Tommy and Mike. Great to see you back. Charlie, it's good to be back, brother. We had a really nice shoot. But we're settling into podcast time now, and it feels good to be chatting with everybody. Talking about Tom Sizemore and his love of sports, how that helped bond us together. And then, it's kind of funny. We did a scene together, and I really tried hard, man. I mean, I prepped. I had every line off book. I had even choices in my mind of like, okay, if he zigs, this is how I'm going to zag. If he says this, I'm going to say that. So I had like alternate cue lines ready to go in case anything changes. Um, and I think I did a pretty good job in this first scene. And that also was big too. Like I think once Tom saw like, all right, I can at least hold my own with him in a scene. Then it was like buddy time, and it was crazy. I remember just kind of like he'd come up to me like, "Hey, what are you doing? Yeah, come to my room." And I would go to his room, and we would just kind of hang out, bullshit. I've told the story on one of my other podcasts, but it's kind of like just like a cute, charming thing about Tom. Tom was a little bit of a rule breaker, and I've broken a rule or two myself along the way. I try to not do that kind of stuff as much. We try to mature and get a little older, a little wiser. But there was a time when I used to get into some uh, ruckus, and I was smoking cigarettes a lot at the time, and Tom was smoking cigarettes a lot at the time as well. And when we would hang out, we'd go in his room, and he had a big suite, so his bathroom was very big. But I noticed that he converted his bathroom basically into his office. So, and I know what you're saying, like, what? What do you mean? Meaning, I'd go into the hotel room, we'd be hanging out, and the bathroom door would open, and he'd say, "Come on in." I'd be like, "What? Okay." So I come in the bathroom, and you open the door, and he's got the chair from the computer desk wheeled in there. He's got like another chair, like a nice chair that was in the hotel suite. He moved a little coffee table in there, and on the counter was just all his everything that he had. He had all of his, notebooks. He had his laptop. He actually would carry with him, like just tons of books and things to read, and he literally made the bathroom like a dressing room. And when I tell you, like, literally like 100 different toiletries, I was fascinated by all of the toiletries that he had. And keep an eye on the toiletry thing because this is all going to come back. It looked like, I don't know if you've ever been to like a really classy locker room at a country club, but a really nice classy country club, when you go into the locker room and you go to the sinks, they have hundreds of fucking toiletries, like every kind of toiletry you can imagine, every deodorant, every cologne, every type of hairspray, every type of fucking gel. That shit's just there. That's like the perks of being in a nice country club. Tom's bathroom had been converted into like a country club of toiletries and shampoos and product and and I was just fucking fascinated. I'm in there, I'm ripping a butt, and I'm just like looking at everything. We're just bullshitting about we're talking about the 1960 Philadelphia Eagles. Okay. Like, you want to talk goddamn obscure football? We're talking about a roster on a football team from the fucking like I think Kennedy was president at the time. Okay, so that's how deep we're going. I'm just fascinated by all these toiletries. And he would really just hold court in the bathroom. Now, like I said, this isn't a tiny little, you're probably thinking like, a Holiday Inn bathroom where there's like a toilet and a sink. It's like, no, this was a massive suite. There was a fucking jacuzzi. There's a bunch of room, space. But I just thought it was funny. And the reason why he did that is because, you smoke in the bathroom, nobody can tell outside. You'll be fine. So the idea was, this was his way of making his non-smoking hotel room smoking, because I set up shop in the bathroom and have a good time. Nobody smells it because it goes right up the vent. But it was a lot of fun. And then, to play to the toiletry story, Tom got his per diem. Every actor gets some cash, and it's like, what are you gonna do with it? What do you need to do? So we go to Walmart, and I have a little trip to Walmart with Tom. And this is why the toiletries. When I tell you it was like we were on that like 90s TV show, like Supermarket Sweep, he went to the like hair care aisle and just literally like took his hand and just dumped everything in the basket. He'd go to like the deodorants, just dump everything in there. He would get, ever the band-aids, toothpaste, like just the most random shit. The kind of stuff that, like you just have like in your house. And I remember just cashing out. It had to be like $200-300 worth of just product and stuff. And he's cashing it out. He's cashing it out. And I was like, I couldn't help myself. I was like, Tom, there's a lot of like stuff here. Like, what do what do you do with all this stuff? And he was basically just like, look, I do 20, 30 movies a year. He's like, I'm hardly ever at home. I almost never have time to like pick this kind of stuff up. So when I get per diem, I just like stock up on it. And then when I go home, like I don't have to ever go shopping for things. Like I'll have like 10 bottles of toothpaste. I'll have like, 10 things of shampoo. So he always loved to just, he was a very prepared man. Uh and I never saw anyone buy so many fucking toiletries. It was really an achievement in the world of toiletries. Now listen, there's so much more to Tom Sizemore than just fucking toiletry stories. Everybody knows the amount of talent the guy had, but today I just wanted to share some like humanizing stories about the man Tom, because anyone could watch his movies and see like, yeah, like I said, probably one of the top five just straight up actors that came out of the gate in the 90s and early 2000s. But these are stories that you're not going to hear about in some article. You're not going to read or see in a behind the scenes story about Tom. These are just kind of real life things that we want to chat about today.
Well,
Mike, how
Tommy,
you doing over there?
the toiletry story, to me, what that represents is that Tom had a way of living that worked for him, and some of the more, scandalous or controversial aspects of his life, it seemed to me that the toiletries thing was his way of having control of his life. And it was something that he enjoyed. It wasn't hurting anybody, it wasn't hurting him. It was something that he could do as kind of a healthy habit. And that put him in the right mindset to do his acting work. And I think that's great.
Yeah, and he made a good point too. It's like I'm not home a lot. So it's like when I'm home, like I just want to be at home. I don't even want to think about like I got to go to the store and get this or whatever. Like you probably just wanted to appreciate the time on the couch, as they say. Um, but yeah, he he really had a lot of shit, man. Like he could have brushed his teeth for 10 years straight. Um, so another kind of fun thing about Tom that we bonded together over was his love of football, and he would always have a football with him. And he would basically, it's kind of funny. This is going back to like 2010, 2011, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe 2012. I don't fucking know. But it was a long time ago. And yeah, foam rollers, these foam rollers that people use to work out the kinks in their body. And it's just like a foam tube, and you'll roll on it or you'll work out like a muscle cramp. They weren't quite as big of a thing 10 years ago. I mean, they were out there, but like not everyone had one. Tom would carry it and travel with a football, and he would use the football to work out his kinks in his back and in his legs. And he would like lay on the football and like roll on it, and he would like put the football in between his thigh and like roll on the floor. It was crazy. He had like a football physical therapy workout that he would do, and then once he was kind of warmed up, he would take that ball and want to like whip it at someone. He'd want to like have someone run some patterns. So Tom was a really high level quarterback in high school. Like almost borderline like state ranked high school athlete throwing the football. So I would run routes for him. We'd go out in the parking lot and he'd be like, "All right, post in, hit it," and I'd run my fucking patterns because I wasn't a great football, but I played football. I wasn't a great football player, but I played in high school and I was a tight end. So, that was something that I would occasionally attempt to do with catch a pass. So we had a lot of fun just like running routes in the parking lot, playing a little football, throwing the football around. Um, so again, like it's just crazy to think that like as a young actor, there I am, like, in my mind, like I'm kind of really buddying it up with this fucking legend, and it made me feel good about myself. And that's kind of my next point about Tom when it comes to like actually working with him. We had probably what was like our most complex scene together. And then I remember that night we're outside the hotel, like, ripping a butt together and kind of just talking. And he's like, "Yeah, Tommy," he's like, "You're really good." And I was like, "Oh, come on, man." He's like, "No, no, no." He's like, "I mean that." He's like, "What the fuck are you doing around here?" I'm like, "Well, I also direct films, and at the time, like I hadn't directed Vault yet, but that was, probably not too far from like what the next step in my career would be. And he's like, "Man, you got to get to LA." He's like, "You should get to LA and I will get you hooked up with my agent, and like you need to," he's like, "You could be fucking Tom Hanks." And I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here, Tom." He's like, "No, I mean it. Like, let me hook you up with my agent." And I never did. And it's one of those things where I'll honestly say, like, it's not a what if moment. I don't regret it. Because, look, and I'm not saying Tom was full of beans, but I've had a lot of actors say, like, "Oh, I'll hook you up with my agent." And, like, what are you going to do? It doesn't always pan out. I'm very happy with, the path I traveled. Um, and again, I don't think back and wonder, gee, that night, like, what if I just packed up my stuff and moved to LA and got in touch with Tom's manager? I never have those kind of thoughts, but it meant a lot to me that Tom actually stepped up and was like, "No, I would help you if you need it, and I think you're worth that help." And what that did for my confidence, man, like I walked out the set the next day thinking I was fucking John Wayne. Like I felt 6'4". It felt really good about what I could do, and I was better. There's no question. Like there's a lot of confidence that goes into performing and acting, and if you don't have confidence, you're going to struggle. Um, and he gave me that confidence just with that simple, like, in my mind, I'm like, well, shit, if this guy's going to vouch for me to his manager, I can't suck that bad, right? So that was kind of a nice thing to hear.
Tommy, I can actually.
Ariana says, real quick, buddy. Ariana says he's working smarter, not harder. And then Miss Ash says, I think there's worse ways to use your per diem. That's very true. There are definitely worse ways to use your per diem. And think about how silky smooth his hair was, how wonderful the fragrances were, and I've never seen so much body spray in my life. What were you saying, Mike?
I remember, I can verify your Sizemore connection because I was a witness to it. I think this was on the Blue Line shoot in the early part of 2015 in Cromwell. And I saw after hours, after one of the days of the shoot, we were in that lounge area, and Tom took you aside. I think you guys might have been sharing a cigarette, and Tom took you aside and gave you a lot of.
Wait, we weren't sharing it. Okay, we had our
Well, you
own
were sharing.
cigarettes.
You each had your own cigarettes, but you were sharing the
We
moment.
weren't like,
No, no, no. You were sharing a smoking moment.
yes.
You were smoking in each other's company.
I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
And Tom was very, not to say hyper, but kind of exuberant. Let's put it that way, and kind of right in your grill, like right in your face, and saying, "You got talent, kid. You got talent." And never cut your hair. Never let them cut your fucking hair. Which,
Wow, I forgot all about that. Wow, holy shit, that's so funny. See, that's why I love doing this show. I completely forgot about that. But I had long hair like down to my shoulders, and he's like, "Don't cut your fucking hair. Like that's your fucking trademark." And I'm like, "Okay, I won't."
so
That's too funny.
I was happy. That was a nice moment to observe that he really did like you, Tommy, and yeah, I know what you mean about sometimes the Hollywood shuffle, as it were, is that people tell you stuff that they think you want to hear, or they. But who knows? I mean, maybe Tommy would have, Tom Sizemore would have helped you out as a fellow Tom. Um, but I think I got killed by Tom in another movie. I think I was one of three people that was like a security guard in a scene that gets shot
Oh
pretty
yes,
rapidly by.
we're very close to that. We're about to get to that. That was on the Getter, I believe, Mike. Is that right? Yeah, we're going to talk about that next. Why don't we? That's a good segue into this next piece here. Um, so basically, just to wrap it up on the assault, it was a really nice kind of first foray with Tom in the world of making movies. We all had a blast with him, um, and then not too long after that, there was another project called The Getter, which, look, hey, this happens in the world of movies, but this is a sad one because The Getter never saw the light of day and never will see the light of day. It was a project that we shot for 4 days, I believe. There was supposed to be an additional portion of shooting. It just didn't happen. Things kind of went sideways, as sometimes they do in films. But we shot 4 really, really good days with Tom. And as part of that 4-day process, Mike was in a really cool scene where I think, wasn't it like a drug den or something, Mike? And you played like one of the guys. I remember you were in a chair and you have to get up, and then Tom like shoots you or hits you or something.
Yeah, I think there was like three of us. I think one of them was our friend David Gears, wrestling friend, the guy from I'm trying to remember. He was in Vault too. The guy in the prison fight scene, the big guy.
Okay.
He was in the prison fight scene in your movie Vault. The wrestler. He was in
Yeah.
TNA. I'm just drawing a
Yeah,
blank
I'm
on his
drawing a
name.
Angel. It's like Angels, Leone or something.
He was he's
Anyway,
a
yeah.
Mexican American
You
gentleman.
got shot by Tom. That's the fucking moral of the
I got
story.
shot by Tom. Crystal Marshall was there, former WWE SmackDown diva, and it was some big guys, and it was an intense little scene that we shot, and I was happy to be shot by Tom. What can I say?
Some of the cool things about The Getter, Sully Erna also worked on The Getter. Sully Erna, the lead singer of Godsmack. And I remember that was kind of fun, and I remember him being excited to work with Tom because, again, Sully's a bit of a movie fan and understands, like, what a big deal it was to be working with a guy like that had been, in such big films and worked with such famous directors and notable people. Um, there was a funny, incident on The Getter. Again, The Getter never happened, and nobody will ever see the it'll never see the light of day. But I remember when I first got in that night, I got to the hotel, and I remember walking around, and there was a spray tan booth incident involving Tom, where, listen, I'm not letting you too far behind the curtain. A lot of actors will hit themselves with a little spray tan before doing a film. It's obviously healthier than laying out in the sun and having that year-round golden look. So, hey, you get a little spray tan action. Um, well, they go into Tom's room and they open, and I'm hanging out with him, because, like, again, "Oh, Tommy, you got the down? Yeah, come on over." So, like, we're hanging out. He's like, I just gotta get spray tanned." I'm like, "Okay." So they go to set up the spray tanning booth in his room, and the fucking booth, this mobile booth that they had, which picture, like, almost like a tent with, like, metal rods that you'd extend, and it's got, like, a vinyl area so that you could almost like painting a car. It's like a mobile car painting tent, but with a person. The tent was too big to open up in his room, and now they were, like, going down to the hotel, front desk, and they're like, "Hey, is there a space we can spray tan Tom?" And they were, like, really confused, and this was a hotel that had a lot of conventions. It was, like, convention type hotel, so, like, all the ballrooms were being used for conventions. So they had just this random little hallway, like, near the bathrooms, like, by the bar in the back way back of the hotel. And I kinda, like, left, and I went to do something else. I was like, I'm not gonna sit around and watch you get fucking spray tanned anymore. Like, "Alright, we'll see you in a little bit." And then I remember, like, going to the bar, maybe bullshitting with some other people, and then getting a drink and going to the bathrooms, and then walking out of the bathroom and looking and just seeing Tom, like, getting spray tanned in the hallway. It was just, like, the funniest thing, like, only in the movie business, like, and he's like, "Hey, Tommy." It's like you're gonna see, like, a half naked guy, like, getting painted in a hallway somewhere. Um, it's just a funny carnival lifestyle of working in movies, like, again, I'm not trying to embarrass Tom with that story, but I just wanna share with people, like, the lifestyle of being an actor and, like, what it's like for these guys, and it's like, man, you're on the road, like, probably, like, a couple 100 days of the year, and it's like each movie you gotta think about, like, "Oh, I gotta get a haircut before the show up. I gotta get my spray tan in. I gotta do this. I gotta, make sure that there's just so much fucking maintenance that goes into it, and it's just funny that the little situations that people find themselves in, like getting spray tanned in a back hallway of a random hotel while there's, like, 1,000 scrapbookers at a convention at the hotel. So you've got, like, little old ladies with their scrapbooking kits walking by and, like, guys getting spray tanned over there. It's just I love this shit, man. It's a carnival lifestyle that we live sometimes.
Tommy, uh, Tom Sizemore kind of reminds me, as far as just an actor goes, as a fan of his work. Um, Kind of certain guys like Christopher Walken or James Woods, like these guys that they just feel like they're always on the edge. Like they don't even have to hype themselves up to get into that type of mindset. They just always kind of feel like they're walking that line. And I think that's why those guys are such great character actors and they're so fascinating.
Yeah, and this is an old phrase that I'm sure you've heard before, but you can't teach cool. People are either cool or they're not. It's not something you can go to school for. You can't get a coach to maybe make yourself cool. You're either fucking cool or you're not. And Tom Sizemore is just fucking cool. He was just fucking cool, period. And I think the guys that you mentioned, James Wood and Christopher Walken, they're in that same category. Like some people just kind of reek cool, and that's what he did. So The Getter was a good one. Again, never saw the light of day, but we had some laughs. Now, a movie that did see the light of day that we worked with Tom was a movie called Blood Circus, which is basically a movie about the underground fighting world, where people would basically be have access to like a very cloak and dagger kind of pay-per-view internet account where they could kind of log in and watch people have fights to the death. And Tom Sizemore played a detective that's trying to stop that shit from happening. And I remember this one was cool because Kevin Nash worked on that movie. Kevin actually played um, sort of the boss behind the illegal fight operation. Um, and there's two Detroit guys. So if you're not a big wrestling fan, Kevin Nash is one of the he's a Hall of Fame wrestler, former world champion. But he's also, everybody thinks movie acting. Everyone, when you think of acting wrestlers, you go right to The Rock, you go right to John Cena, you go right to Batista. But really, Kevin Nash was making movies long before any of those guys. Kevin Nash was the Super Shredder back in 1988 or 89, I think. Kevin's dabbled in films for his entire career. Um, so it was cool to see Kevin Nash and Tom Sizemore kind of yuck it up because they're both Detroit, Michigan guys, and they're both right around the same age range. So it was fun. Again, Kevin Nash is, if you don't know this, he's almost 7 feet tall, and he was a really talented basketball player. He played for the University of Tennessee, very high-ranking college ball. If you're playing for Tennessee, you're like potentially like a guy who could go pro at that level. And they both were talking about, Tom was also a great high school basketball player and athlete. So it was kind of fun to hear the two of them like talk about high school athletics in Detroit, Michigan in the late 70s or mid 70s, like whenever they were kids. It was just so much fun to hear them kind of go back and forth about another famous Michigan high schooler that they both knew about, named Magic Johnson, who also was from Michigan. So they were just like sharing a lot of cool old school stories, and I remember Sizemore and Nash really kind of just hitting it off, and this is another one where, like, I remember, like, I had Tom's cell phone, but this had been a couple years. Blood Circus was probably a year or two after The Getter. Uh, and I remember just getting a text from him, and there was one of those days where, like, I worked that day, Tom had wrapped for the day, and I got a text while I'm working, and he's like, "Hey, Tommy, hit me up after work. Let's hang out." And I remember just like being like, "Wow, like this is so fucking cool. Like Tom Sizemore wants to hang out. Like, you kidding me?" Um, so it was fun. Like again, that we just kind of, as they say, picked up where we left off, and our friendship continued. The next movie that we worked on together, we didn't really work on together, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's a movie called Black Wake out there, where, as they say, both of our names are on the roster, but we never played a day together. Meaning like I worked my day. I literally just worked one day on this movie. I worked my one day, and Tom worked at a different time altogether, and we were ships in the night, didn't see each other. Um, but then let's spend a little time as we close things out talking about the last time that I worked with Tom Sizemore on a movie called Damon's Revenge, which was a really fun horror movie shot in March of, I want to say, 2021. Uh, and this was a fun one for me. I was an actor in the film. I was playing this kind of psychopath. Um, but it was our last ride together. It was it's one of those things where, a few years had passed now. This was probably a good, like, 5 years after the assault, when I first met Tom, maybe even 6 years. And unfortunately, his physical nature changed a little bit. And he always had a bad back, and it was, like, always a problem for him, and he could deal with it on the assault, but on this movie, you could tell, like, it was really messing with him. Um, and I felt bad because, like, you could tell he was just kinda, like, walking differently and, like, couldn't help but, like, be hunched down in pain kinda from this thing. And that's when I realized, like, what a tough bastard Tom is because, or I should say Tom was, because he never complained, and it was so obvious, especially, like, when you're friends with somebody, you can tell, like, their pained face. You can tell when they're not being themselves, and I could just tell he was in a lot of physical pain during this movie, but he never bitched, he never complained, he was never late. He made everything, he made it to set and got through the movie, despite battling this back issue. But what was cool about it, remember I told you Sully Erna was, in the movie The Getter, which never got made. Sully was in this movie too, and there's this really great scene between myself, Sully Erna and Tom Sizemore, and we had all kind of worked together before, even though the movie didn't go anywhere. And we had a lot of chemistry. Sully and Tom hit it off, and I remember that being one of these scenes where like we took the script and just fucking threw it out, and we just riffed, and I remember it was like a nice wide master to start it out, and we were just riffing. Tom was just like trying all these different things. I think he flicked a cigarette at me at one point, which I didn't know was happening. And to Tom's credit, didn't hit my face, which is nice. Hit me somewhere in the chest. But I mean, like I was like, we were just making stuff up. And when I say making stuff up, I don't mean like that sounds like we were just like running roughshod on set. We weren't. It was all within the navigational lines of what the scene should have been. But we were just riffing and we improv and we came up with some really great shit that was not in the script. And then, of course, once you shoot it in the master, okay, we know what we liked while we were improvising and while we were fucking around. Let's punch in and get some singles and actually make some of those improvised choices a little more specific. So there's a really fun scene with us all in Damon's Revenge. And it's kind of funny, like that's why like maybe everything does happen for a reason. The getter was kind of a bust, but Tom and I and Sully all got to meet and be a little friendlier than we probably would have been had we not met. And we rocked this scene out. It was a lot of fun. And then I'll
Tom,
just say, go ahead, buddy.
I just wanted to mention the gentleman whose name I forgot earlier was Apollo, the wrestler that our friend David Gear brought in, producer David
Apollo
Gear.
Anton Ono, is that right? Is it
I believe
Apollo
so.
Antoine Ono?
He
Yeah, I
went by
think that's his
Apollo
name.
in
Yeah, he's
TNA wrestling. Big guy. He was in
yeah,
Vault of the fight scene, and he was in that shooting scene with Tom as well. So
yeah, he was a really cool guy. Big dude, big scary looking guy, but super nice. It's funny, when you hang out with enough wrestlers, and this isn't always 100% the case, but it seems like the bigger and scarier looking the wrestler, usually the nicer and sweeter of a guy they are. It's probably a defense mechanism that they've developed over the years because just looking at people like want to, feel like they're about to be eaten, so they have to be like extra nice. Um, Anna says hello, all. Hi, all. Hi, Anna. Good to have you back with us. And it feels good to be back, man. It was a few weeks away. I missed everybody. All right, so let's talk about Damon's Revenge and the last night with Tom. This is my last time with Tom, our last kind of foray together. It wasn't a wrap party, but it was a couple nights before we wrapped, and I remember we all went to a bar called Chicago Sam's. Shout out to David Gear, who was the producer on that movie. And David and Tom always had a very, very close relationship, and David took good care of Tom. And on that particular night, we all went to this really great bar, and it was one of those nights in March, towards the end of March, when it's almost the perfect temperature outside, like it's a little unseasonably warm. Still have your light jacket on, but you're not freezing. You're layered. Everyone's got some nice outfit choices because you're allowed to do a little layering, which is always nice. And it was one of those nights where we're all kind of just having a couple drinks outside, little outside area, and just hanging out and having fun and not talking about movies, not talking about the business, not talking about any bullshit. We were talking about basketball. He was showing me videos of LaMelo Ball in high school as a freshman and how he was dominating the court with his brothers and telling me how LaMelo Ball is going to be the greatest basketball player of his generation. And, I told him that I collect cards. He's like, well, you need to buy every single LaMelo Ball card that you can. Just buy them all. And I actually did. Like that night, I bought a bunch of LaMelo Ball cards. So I was like, I better take Tom's advice. So I did. I did what he said. But it was nice, man. It didn't feel like being with a bunch of coworkers. It felt like being with your friend. And we had a nice night. And it was one of those nights when probably hung out till 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, just bullshitting and talking. And as the night wound down, said bye to Tom, and that was the last time I ever saw him. And it's nice that we had that kind of last really great night together where everybody kind of just had fun. It was a nice group. It wasn't a big group. It was probably about, I don't know, 12 of us, 10 or 12 of us that all went out. And hey, if you have to have a last encounter with somebody, that's a pretty good one to have.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Tommy. You know, it's crazy. You know, you never know when some of these people you work with are not going to be there anymore. And you know, as you know, I guess it's 5 or 6 years ago, a good friend of ours who we worked with, Joe Jaffo Carrieri, passed away unexpectedly, and it's you just never know the last time you're going to talk to someone or see someone, and that's why there's that old expression, never go to bed angry with somebody, you know, and if you can avoid that, that's probably for the best, because you don't know who's waking up in the morning. You know, life is uncertain, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really is. And, I think that, sometimes as people, as humans, we feel the need to, like, even when something really shitty happens to us, we feel the need to find the learning lesson. Like, what's the lesson in this? What can I take out of this? And hey, we've heard it before. It's cliche. People say it all the fucking time, but it is true. Yeah, reach out to somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. Say what's up. Like maybe I wish that I had reached out to Tom once or twice in the last couple of years. And like Mike said, you never know when it's too late. So relationships are a weird thing. Sometimes when time goes by, you think that like, that person doesn't want to hear from me, but that's not true. They probably do, and sometimes you got to make the first move. And it's not about pride. It's not about who's right or who's wrong or who's a better friend than the other person. It's just like reach out. I saw some really dumb fucking gif. It was like one of those gifs or memes. I don't fucking know, but it was like something along the lines of like, stay silent for a couple months and see who reaches out to you, and that's how you'll know who are your true friends. And it's like, man, that's kind of a cynical way to look at it. Like people's lives get in the way and shit happens. Maybe you should fucking reach out to somebody and be a friend. What kind of friend is that? Like, let me just be silent and see who talks to me. So reach out to people. Closing thoughts on Tom. I will say this. This is something that upset me and made me a little angry. I didn't like how every time I saw a tribute or an article about my friend Tom and his passing, you get a couple sentences about what a legendary actor he was, and then you get a couple paragraphs on his struggles and challenges with addiction and substance abuse and everything else. And again, I'm not going to change the world in any way by saying this, but I think it's a little fucked up that somebody can spend a lifetime creating so many wonderful moments on screen, providing so much happiness, entertainment, emotion for other people to connect with in their art, their whole life, whole professional career. And then we got to kind of shit on them in this closing statement at the end that they struggled with all these things. And it's like, yes, I understand that's a part of life as well. But I just wish people could spend a little more time talking about the positive things that people bring to the world in their passing rather than all the shit that went wrong. Because what the fuck? Hear that? Larry agrees with me.
You know, if the cat agrees, we know it's true. Here he is. Hey,
Ah, Larry agrees.
there he is.
So, on behalf of myself, Larry, the official and action cat, and Mike, we really do think that it's bullshit when celebrities get kind of labeled in such a fucked up way. And it's like nobody knows what it's like to walk an inch in their shoes and to experience the things. It looks like I have a tail right now. Experience the things that they went through. All right, Larry. So, you know, I think people could be a little bit more careful when somebody of fame or notoriety passes. I think people could be a little more careful about how they write about them and describe them.
Well, Tommy, it reminds me of the Eagles song, "Kick 'em up, kick 'em when they're up, kick 'em when they're down, kick 'em all around." You know, we need dirty laundry.
Yep.
It's if you really think. I mean, I've been thinking about this, Tommy, and I'm probably not the first one to think of this, but it seems like with our social media hashtag gotcha culture, we've developed our society as a whole into one big high school where everyone has to kind of pick on each other or feud and fight and gossip, and it doesn't really lead to much productivity if you're always worried about what someone said on Twitter or what someone hashtags someone with or whatever. It's not productive for your own life.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, to me, it seems like the low-hanging fruit of lazy writing and low-hanging fruit. Like, okay, I can easily write my couple hundred words about this bullshit. Let's go down the list here before we call it a day. My son sort of, Andres, what's up, brother? My son sort of looks like LaMelo Ball as a kid, I think at least. You know what? I follow your son on Instagram, and he does kind of have a LaMelo Ball vibe going on. Great relations, yeah, never go to bed early. Angry rather. Never go to bed early. Man, I need another cup of coffee. Stephen E says, correct, bro. Stephen E says, exactly. They still had a family and people that cared about them. They're a human being. It isn't easy living life in the public eye. Yeah, and you got to have a little more respect for people, because there's just, again, like addiction, something that a lot of people struggle with, but there's so much more to a person's legacy than just that. So I will say this, for as long as I'm around, I'm going to be saying nothing but great things about Tom Sizemore and all the times that we've had together. And there are some moments that, to me, here's the measure of a person and on their impact on your life. There are some things that if I'm feeling bad, I could still close my eyes, imagine, and out of nowhere just start laughing because of something that Tom Sizemore said or did or something funny that we shared together. So Tom is always gonna provide that little smile for me, and I'm gonna always remember him as an actor who could flip the switch when he needed to, could be laughing with you and making a joke 1 second, and then just when that camera gets turned on, he just becomes a different person and carves out a performance that you could only dream of. So we miss you, Tom, and we shall relive everything you did in all these wonderful movies that you left us. And we have one more comment here. We're all busy and forget to reach out. If someone brings joy to your life, then it's never a mistake to reach out first. At least that's what I tell myself when I reach out first. No, you're right. I mean, listen, people don't understand that phones do work two ways, but sometimes you got to work them one way a few times before you get that return call. So, everybody, thank you so much for being with us. Next week, we're going to be back at it on Tuesday. Um, we're going to have a little mystery topic. We haven't really identified what all we're going to be talking about just yet, but I promise you one thing: we will be back. We'll be here Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern, and maybe we'll drop down a little notification about what we're talking about later in the week. And if you haven't, please do subscribe to this channel here. And I can't say this enough. Uh, Sharing the show, making a post about the show, putting it out there to your social media pages. It goes a long way for us, and we really appreciate that. And thanks for being with us, and we will see you next week.